Hello everyone and welcome to Big Rock Moto. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I really appreciate that. I only have two requests as we start out. One, if you're not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe. And two, whenever you're shopping for parts and gear, please use my affiliate shopping links which are below, or you can bookmark them and there'll be a link right here. Thank you so much for doing that. All right, so this is the brand new 2026 KTM 690 Enduro R, and it's been heavily revised and improved versus the outgoing bike. The whole key to the 690 Enduro and the equivalent Husqvarna 701 Enduro has always been maximum versatility between both on-road and off-road riding. So the way I would best describe the 690 Enduro, it's really like the ultimate high-performance dual sport motorcycle. It's basically the ultimate dual sport. Now, it doesn't tour as well as KTM's 890 Adventure, and it doesn't do enduro riding as well as KTM's 500 EXC. However, it manages to combine characteristics from both those motorcycles into this one motorcycle. And this bike can truly do everything from cruising down the freeway at high speeds to riding on single track. Now, it's worth noting that this is the most powerful single-cylinder motorcycle ever made. At 78 horsepower, this makes more horsepower than some other twin-cylinder or multi-cylinder adventure bikes. So here's what we're going to do today. I'm going to show you all the new updates and new features of the 2026 model. We're going to take it for an extended ride on freeway, in sand, on single track, off-road, curvy roads, really give it a good test. I'm going to show you all the specs and features of this bike. We'll come back here, we'll talk about a summary of the pros and cons, we'll talk about the competitors to this bike, and we'll end with some final thoughts and trying to answer who is this bike for. All right, so I want to cover what's new on the 690 Enduro for 2026, but right before we get into that, I do have a question for you all as the audience. If you have been an owner of a 690 Enduro or a Husky 701 Enduro, please chime in below in the comments and let us know or let me know about your ownership experience with that bike and would you buy it again? I think that'll be an interesting discussion down in the comments below. And what I love so much about Big Rock Moto is there's a great community. There's so much good feedback in the comment sections, and I think it's really valuable for all the riders out there. All right, so pardon me for reading off a note, but there's so much technical information here that there's no way I could ever memorize that. So new for 2026. Now, what KTM did not do is they did not radically change the philosophy of this bike. A lot of folks have been asking for like an adventurized version of this bike with wind protection and more fuel capacity and things like that. But KTM decided not to do that. They decided to stick with the minimalist dual sport philosophy. So here's what's new for 2026. You've got new colors, a new bodywork. You can see that. They've updated the single-cylinder LC4 engine. It's 50% new, so 50% parts in the engine are brand new. It delivers significantly more power and smoother operation. It's got new rubber engine mounts to reduce vibration, and it's got much longer service intervals. We'll get into details on all this in a minute. The power goes up from 74 horsepower to 78 horsepower. Also, very importantly, the power has been moved. There's much more power now at the low to mid RPMs than before. So if you didn't like how the previous engine sort of didn't have great low end power, they've really greatly improved that with this bike, which is huge. It's got a new exhaust system, and the catalyst or the catalytic converter has been moved out of the end silencer into the mid pipe. It's got a new airbox, it's got a new fuel pump. The clutch is new, it's a slipper clutch now, and it uses their PASC or PASC system. The throttle is new, so it's got a faster throttle response, right? Ride-by-wire throttle. The suspension, the travel remains similar to before, but it's got new damping and new spring rates, and the settings have been updated. They've updated the frame. It's still the trellis frame, which a lot of people like, although there's some limitations to that we'll talk about. But they've made it a little bit more flexible. They've updated the chassis flex to try to tweak and improve the handling of the bike a little bit. The headlight is new. It's an LED headlight now, which is great. You've got a new skid plate, and you've got new On this bike, you have mounts now for a center stand for people who tour on their bike. A center stand is something really nice to have. You've got a brand new 4.2-inch TFT display, replacing that horrible little display that they used to have on these bikes. It also has KTM Connect for infotainment, directions, phone connectivity, and everything like that. You have updated cornering MTC, motorcycle traction control. You have street and off-road ride modes. We'll talk about how all that works in detail. You've got updated cornering ABS with standard off-road ABS linked to off-road ride mode, and you can fully set up how you want the ABS to work. And what's amazing about this bike is it remembers the settings you put in when you key cycle or power cycle the bike. It's one of the only motorcycles out there to do that, and that's really phenomenal. It's also got a new optional rally mode, which is an upgrade you have to pay more for. Just like on the 890s that we've seen that. You have a 0 through 9 slip adjuster, and it also has dynamic slip adjust, which is new, which automatically adjusts to the terrain. Here's what they did not change with the 690. They did not add any fuel capacity. They did not change the gear ratios. That's going to be a big topic of discussion for this video, and a lot of people are disappointed about that. They did not lower the seat height and make it more accessible. It's still very tall. They did not add cruise control, which would have been nice, and they did not give us any extra wind protection. But don't worry, despite that, this is still a phenomenal motorcycle. You just have to keep watching this review to find out just how good this bike is. All right, specs on this bike. The base price is $13,399 in the US. The warranty depends on the country you're in. In the USA, we get a 2-year warranty, but that extends to 4 years if and only if you use dealer servicing. They call that the premium warranty. And it's a pretty cool deal, but you are going to pay for dealer servicing to be able to get that free extended warranty. So it's really not free, is it? The wet weight of this bike, and wet weight means with a full tank of gas and all fluids ready to ride, is 335 pounds or 152 kilograms. Fuel capacity on this bike, you can see you've got the rear fuel tank on this bike, which is unique, 3.5 gallons or 13.3 liters. Your fuel economy is around 55 miles a gallon or 4.2 liters per 100 kilometer. Your range before hitting reserve is around 150 miles or about 240 kilometers. Now, I will tell you the fuel economy indicator in the dash, at least on my test bike, is not accurate at all. It was saying I was getting like 38 miles a gallon, but I was getting like 55 miles a gallon when I checked it. So just be aware of that. That's something they could probably fix with a software update. The engine on this bike is a 693cc single cylinder, 78 horsepower, and 53 foot-pounds or 73 Newton meters of torque. Service intervals on this bike are crazy high for a single cylinder. 9,000 miles or 15,000 kilometers for oil changes, minor services. 37,000 miles or 60,000 kilometers for major services, which is sensational. Just unbelievable that they're able to do that. Transmission is a 6-speed manual with a slipper clutch and an optional quick shifter. Suspension on this bike, front forks are 48 millimeter WP Explorer open cartridge with 265 millimeters or 10.4 inches of travel. They have rebound and compression adjustment, but no preload adjustment on the fork. Rear shock is a WP Explorer, 250 millimeters or 9.8 inches of travel, and it's adjustable for preload, compression, and rebound. Brakes on this bike are by Brembo. You have a 300 millimeter front disc with a 2-piston caliper. Maybe that's why they don't feel so strong. And the rear is a 240 millimeter disc with a single piston caliper. Tires and wheels on this bike. So you have a tubed, spoked 21-inch front, and it comes with a TKC 80 from Continental. And your rear wheel and tire is a tubed, spoked 18-inch wheel with, again, a TKC 80. All right, let's start the tour looking at the lighting. You've got the LED high and low beam, and you have LED turn signals. Let me show you the rear lights, rear tail light, and rear LED turn signals. Obviously, you have a high front fender, dirt bike style. You've got the fork guards, got the radiator. The radiator is a little bit vulnerable on these bikes, so I would look at getting some protection for that. The evap canister for emissions. Side of the engine, the skid plate, which comes standard, trellis frame, which looks pretty cool. The passenger peg hangers are these large hangers here, but look what they did. They gave you attachment points for soft luggage straps. Somebody at KTM was really thinking ahead there. I really appreciate that. Foot pegs, which are pretty good size for off-road, so that's nice. Your brake lever coming around the back, the rear. This would be nice to clean this up and kind of remove. You could remove this piece. I'm not saying this would be legal, so check your local laws, but then move the license plate up here and just get rid of this lower piece. I think it would really clean up the back. The fuel cap, which is at the rear. Let me show you something else. I couldn't figure out on the old bike, the seat release was a cable down here. Now they've moved it, so you have to open the fuel cap, and then the seat release is this little cable right here. So you pull this and then you can take the seat off. So let me do that for you really quick. If I pull the seat off, you can see under the seat here, you've got the battery and the air box and air intake. Under the seat, I really like how KTM does this on their bikes. They give you the suspension settings and all of the fuses here. So that's really, really handy. Plus they show you the chain slack and how to measure that. Okay, now the exhaust, it still is kind of big and heavy looking, just like the old one. But now they've kind of, this used to be super hot back here. It still gets hot, but they moved the catalyst or the converter into this area here. So I don't know, to me, this bike runs even hotter and feels hotter on my legs than the old bike did. But there may be some benefits of this. I'm just not totally sure yet. Maybe for luggage, this is better because this without the cat right here, maybe this won't be as hot. Maybe it's going to be easier to run that soft luggage. Of course, I feel like a popular modification is going to be for people to change the exhaust. But now you've got the cat in here, so we'll have to have further research on sort of aftermarket solutions for that. Kickstand, which is fine. Shifter. The heat, you have to have this heat guard here because this pipe is really close to your leg. The adjustments for your rear suspension are inside there, and you need some tools to do that. It'd be nice to see toolless adjustment like some bikes have gone to. On the forks, your suspension adjustment, compression and rebound. I would have liked to have seen the preload adjusters that we see on the 890 Adventure R. Those are super handy, and this bike does not have that. But you still have the different lines for your fork height to adjust how you want the bike to handle. They don't have adjustable handlebar positions, which kind of is disappointing because the 890 has that. That would be a nice feature to have. The mirrors, which are fine, but I would change those out because if for an off-road bike, you need a flexible mirror to protect your wrists and arms if you crash. You don't want something that's going to, if this impacts the ground, it could snap this off and then you wouldn't have any way to attach your lever anymore on either side. So you got to get those changed out first thing. The hand guards, which are more of just a kind of a wind guard, I would get some wraparounds so that to protect your leverage. You can see I already did some performance modifications over here to the brake lever there. Moving into the controls and dash, you've got a nice big ABS button here, which you can totally disable the front and rear ABS with this button, but the off-road ABS is tied to the ride mode, which I'll show you here in a second. You've got this four-way joystick, and you've got some simple controls over here. Now going here into this TFT, this is very similar. It's the same TFT as they have on the new 390 Enduro R. And it's a little bit small, but I like it. It does the things you need to do. So now you've got a tachometer, whereas the old bike, you obviously didn't have that. You've got a gear indicator and a speedometer, clock, temperature, and some different indicator lights down here. If I hit down on the four-way joystick, I can see my trip computer, my lapse time. This fuel is not, there's no fuel gauge, which is disappointing on this bike. And I should add that to the list of downsides or things I don't like if I didn't already. You can see your water temperature and different settings here. You can scroll back to there. If I go into here, ride, I can change my ride mode. I've got street, off-road, and rally. So off-road is like preset traction control and stuff like that. Rally, you have to pay for that one to unlock it, but then you can go and adjust your traction control settings. So it says MSR disabled, that's fine. That's the part of the traction control system. Sometimes I have trouble going back. Okay, go back. Now I can show you this here. So I like 6 or 7, 6, 7, 6, 7. That's really what you want. But no, this is the slip adjuster here. So 9 is a lot of traction control. 1 is low traction control, 0's off. It's super easy to change that with the joystick here. It works amazing. We'll show that, how that works kind of in the riding segment. If I go into info, I can see trip 1, trip 2. Don't pay attention to what this says. This is way off. This readout for the fuel economy is not even close to being accurate. Coolant temperature, oil temperature, battery voltage, odometer, service, warnings. I guess I have a warning. I don't know what the warning is. Anyway, so yeah, that's the dash. Ergonomics and seat height on the 690 Enduro R. This is an interesting bike for this. So it's very tall, 36.8 inches or 935 millimeters, and that's not a typo. That makes it not very accessible for riders. I want to say shorter riders, but really just average people. Average person is not really tall enough to be comfortable on this bike unless you are an expert, experienced off-road rider where you're used to just putting a toe down on one side and that doesn't bother you. The bike's pretty lightweight, so it tends to be less of an issue than this would be if this was a heavier, like a big adventure bike or something like that. It's worth noting that KTM's own 890 Adventure R is 2 inches or 60 millimeters lower on the seat height than this bike, and that's a huge difference if you think about that. So the other thing to talk about here before I jump on is this seat is really goes all the way forward here, almost up to the handlebar, so you can sit up on the front of this bike and ride it more like a dirt bike or an enduro bike, which you can't do on the adventure bikes because they have the gas tank and stuff here, so you can't get your weight forward of the foot pegs or the swing arm. On this bike, you can get your weight over the foot pegs in front of that swing arm pivot and really stay seated under cornering off-road, where you can't do that on the adventure bike. So that it kind of blends the enduro and adventure bike worlds there with this seat that you can really move around on. Now, I'm 5'10" or 1.78 meters tall. I have a 32-inch inseam. You can see I'm on my tiptoes on this bike. Usually when I stop, I hang my butt off one side and I just plant a foot, right? That's what you do. But if I go in the middle of the seat, to be fair, I am tiptoeing this bike. It's a tall machine. That being said, though, you know, it's not heavy, so that kind of makes up for it. Okay, so drop and lift test real quick on the 690. It's going to be pretty simple. You know, I can already tell, I mean, it's obviously pretty lightweight, so it's not going to be too bad. You do notice it being heavier than something like a 500, but you also notice it being dramatically lighter than something like an 890 because it falls about halfway in between. It'd be nice to have some radiator protection. I worry about the radiators getting damaged. I think they're pretty susceptible to damage on this bike. And I would get some hand guards as well. So really, on this bike, I can just grab it. I can just grab the handlebars and then just lift it right up. I don't have to employ any sort of special techniques or anything because it's not heavy.
All right, it's time for performance testing on the 690. We're going to be in street mode, so we maintain our traction control and our ABS. This bike is incredibly powerful for how much it weighs, and you're about to see it's very, very quick, and you kind of need the electronics to keep the front wheel on the ground. Otherwise, you can wheelie for all day if you want. This is a great bike for doing wheelies if you're into that kind of stuff. So let me kind of show you the acceleration and braking a little bit on this machine. Do our best here. Full power. Whoa! Okay, there's 80. Emergency stop. I mean, the amount of G-forces you can get, I mean, it's the brakes feel a little bit weak to me. I just think with that single front disc stopping this bike from high speed, I could use more brake, but it's adequate. It's okay. The acceleration is pretty brutal on this thing. I mean, that's 70 just like that. The acceleration is pretty insane on this bike when you really get into it. Let's do it again. Wow, 80, 90, 100. Yeah, it's like when I'm stopping from 100 miles an hour, that's when I feel like I could use more brakes. Oh man, this bike gets my heart rate up. This thing is no joke. Like, it is as fast as you could ever want it to be. It's almost like, why do you even need that much power on a bike like this? It's so much more than you can use off-road. And then on-road, this bike is faster than a lot of street bikes that I test. But then you've got knobby tires and tall suspension, and it feels kind of awkward. So it's kind of an interesting bike in that way. I think a lot of people love it for that. A lot of people don't love it, but that's okay. You know, there's a bike for everybody. But the performance, just outright performance, is phenomenal on this machine. It truly, truly is. I was kind of messing up the shifting. I changed my boots. I don't know, I'm having a hard time with the shifter, so I apologize for that. The quick shift, I didn't get quite right on some of that, so I apologize for that. All right, freeway test. The 690. God, look at that acceleration. 86. Jeez. Crazy. All right, I've got some wind at my back here, which helps with the audio, with the filming going this speed on a bike without any windshield or wind protection. I really want to talk about the vibrations and the overall sort of comfort experience of cruising here at these higher speeds and trying not to get a speeding ticket at the same time. The mirrors have a lot of buzz in them, but I would change those out anyway to double take mirrors. I would throw the stock mirrors away. First thing I would do. Let's talk about vibration. Cruising here at 80 miles an hour in top gear. It's about 5,800 RPM, so not too bad. The vibration is actually very minimal. I don't feel any vibration through the foot pegs or through the seat. And then through my handlebar grips, I feel just a little light tingling. It's not that bad at all. And in fact, this is smoother than some twin cylinder bikes that I've tested. So I'm extremely impressed with the vibration control of this updated engine with the rubber engine mounts and everything they've done to improve it. It really is phenomenal. I mean, 85 miles an hour, I really feel very little vibration. There's a little buzziness, but it's not too bad. It is windy out here, obviously. I mean, you're riding a naked bike with no wind protection, so that would get pretty tiring on a long day on the highway, depending on how fast you're going. I will say, though, that there's no really wind buffeting, because a lot of the bikes with the windshields create the buffeting sound. There's no buffeting because there's no windshield to create that. There's just a lot of wind blast. They passed here by a Harley. He must be laughing. Like, what's this guy doing riding a dirt bike? Pull it up like yeah, going 80 again. I mean, really, if you had a little bit of wind protection, this could be some, you could really do this on this bike all day. It's really sensational, just impressive that a dual sport bike can have this much power for the highway and this good of vibration control. This single cylinder engine is really a masterpiece. The way that they've smoothed it out and given you so much power, it really is crazy. I mean, look at that. 90, it's smooth at 90. 90 is actually feels smoother than 80. Like, you really could cruise this bike at 90 for hours on end. I mean, you would have to stop for gas quite a bit, and you know, the seat's not the best and there's no windshield, but whoa, what the heck. But beyond that, maybe we have to start to filter here. What's my speed? 30? Yeah, let's start to filter up. And it's really good if you lane filter, because this bike is so freaking narrow and so maneuverable, and it's so tall, so you sit up at the height of the trucks and stuff like that we have here in the US. Everybody has to drive a pickup truck, even though they're always empty, and they can't fit it in a parking spot, but that's America, I guess. I have a truck too. Hey, just saying. But yeah, overall, I'm extremely impressed with the performance of this thing for the freeway. And just like that, back up to 85. Okay, doing some sporty riding on the 690 Enduro. Oh man, it's so windy. You can probably hear that in the camera. Now this wind is just terrible right now. being a lighter bike, it kind of gets pushed around a bit by this gusty wind we're having. Sport riding on this bike, it feels like a really powerful supermoto bike, which is a good thing. It's super fun to ride on a road like this, and the tighter the corners, the better. You've got this wide handlebar with all the leverage. You've got the super punchy, torquey engine. It's a lot faster than you would think for a single cylinder. My only real limitation in riding it is just my own safety and how much lean angle do you want to put in on these knobby off-road tires, right? Yeah, it's so easy to throw through the bends and just have a ton of fun. It really is a fun bike to ride in almost every aspect. It's just exciting, and it's agile. It is kind of tall and skinny and kind of awkward, I guess, if you look at it that way, but once you get used to it, you know, it does really, really well. Hello, bicyclist. God, it's quick. Oh, man. You could get into so much trouble on this thing. Jeez. This thing is really a riot out here to ride like this. It really, really is. Ah! Oh, that wind is crazy. I'm getting pushed from all directions by that wind. Power! Damn! Oh my god, I really want to ride this now in the supermoto version. I think that thing's got to be incredible. Damn! Alright, it's time to start the off-road testing on the 690 Enduro R 2026. Play with the traction control. We'll talk about suspension, which is very, very good and obviously fully adjustable. I have it set to the factory standard settings, which I always do for these tests. We'll talk about the power delivery, which is much better. They've improved the low-end power. The fueling's very good. We'll talk about the handling, which is kind of a mixed bag, I feel. With the fuel at the back, it tends to sometimes feel kind of nervous on the front because you've got a rearward weight bias, which sometimes shows itself and sometimes doesn't. But let's kind of ride and talk about it. I mean, it still is an extremely all-around capable bike. It really is. So we'll put it through all sorts of testing here in this off-road segment. But let's kind of start with this kind of deserty, faster two-track. That's fun. The bike really excels in this kind of terrain like this. You can pop off the little jumps and obstacles. You can play around through the ruts and the gullies, and it's just playful and confidence inspiring in a way that, you know, like the big heavy adventure bikes are not. I mean, I took the 890 on this track, and it was good. It was good. But this is whoa. This is just a little bit less stressful, I would say. Yeah, it really likes this faster terrain where that tall gearing is not an issue as it is in the tighter terrain like you'll see in the single track. The suspension on this bike is fantastic. I mean, just fantastic. It truly is a great suspension.
whoa, when this thing hooks up and finds traction, it can really drive forward very, very well. I've got traction at number 4, and I tend to really like that on this bike. Yeah, this thing's really maneuverable. Whoa! Going through the rocky parts here. Yeah, this thing, whoa, really moving around now. Okay. You! See, like right there, the front end just kind of does like a little like dance or wiggle sometimes. Sometimes I just don't know about the front end on this thing. It can feel a little bit unbalanced at times, but it doesn't always exhibit that. It just kind of depends on the situation. So I'm really it's hard to figure out the handling on this bike. It's kind of hard. It doesn't really handle like an adventure bike, and it also doesn't really handle like an enduro bike because it's heavier, and because you've also got that fuel tank at the back, which feels like the back is kind of moving around sometimes with that weight back there, and the front can feel kind of light. So it's kind of hard to figure out the handling on this bike. I think you do get used to it, and based on how popular this bike is, I know people do get used to it. They typically like it a lot, actually. This bike would probably benefit from having some more weight on the front, with some aftermarket fuel tanks or rally towers or stuff like that. Would also benefit, I think, from having a steering stabilizer fitted. Oh man, this bike has so much potential, and I really like this traction control as well. On this trail, I could just cruise in second gear and not even really shift. It's so responsive from the bottom. Let me go down off of idle. It's just whoa, and you just shoot off like a freaking rocket. But it's a smooth response off the bottom. Very, very nice and smooth. I like this bike more than I thought I would. I really do. Yeah, the suspension is on the firm side. So if you like a soft, cushy suspension, this bike's probably not going to be for you as much. But what it means is that you can really ride this thing fast and aggressive and pop it off things and jump it and do things that the chassis is capable of staying in control. So I really appreciate that. The firm suspension, I like it. I think it's good for the kind of person who typically is going to buy this bike, I think. Hydraulic clutch as well. I like that hydraulic clutch. I'm baffled that the 890 has a cable clutch and this bike, which is cheaper, has a hydraulic clutch. I never understand that. Yeah, I could ride this kind of terrain. It's just this bike just gobbles it up. It loves this kind of stuff. Just loves it. Ooh, this is fun. Ah. Oh, I also wanted to talk about this seat. So probably I showed this in the ergonomics section, but if you look at the seat, so you can sit in front of the foot peg on this bike. So typically for enduro style riding, you would want to sit up in front of the foot pegs to get your weight on the front. You can do that on this bike. You can sit way up here with your knees up to the radiators. That's kind of how you know you're sitting right, if your knees are up at your radiators. We tend to sit too far back, typically, as adventure riders. On something like an 890 or a GS especially, it can be hard to get your weight forward. This, you can sit down a lot, because you can get your weight forward to keep it over the front. You can go around corners sitting down, whereas you're not doing that on the bigger heavy adventure bike because they're just too heavy and you've got to stand up to get control of it. This bike you can sit down, and if you need to, do a little bit of enduro or motocross style cornering with your foot out in front like that, kind of by the radiator shroud. Don't ever put your foot out here. You're going to break your leg, break your ankle.
hyperextend your groin. Don't ever ride like that, please, ever, ever, ever. So yeah, that's an interesting thing there. Of course, yeah, this rear fuel tank, I don't know, like today I'm doing great. When I first rode this bike, when I got it, I didn't really like it, but the more I ride it, I guess I'm just getting used to the way it handles. And I love it because I was on the freeway today, the 10 freeway, going 90. I was on the highway doing sport riding. I was on single track, and now I'm here on this rough, rugged 2-track. And it does all of it. It's the only bike I can think of that really can do all of it pretty comfortably without being out of its comfort zone. I mean, yeah, it's a little bit out of its comfort zone on the slow speed single track because the gearing is just so freaking tall. But my God, is one bike to do it all? This is completely unmatched and unparalleled right now. It truly, truly is. I think that, like, you could get a DRZ 4S is a pretty good dual sport that's modern, but it doesn't have 6 speeds. It doesn't have the power. It doesn't have some of the tech and features. This has more fuel capacity. I don't know. I mean, this is more expensive, but I think if you told me I had to buy this or a DRZ, it's a tough one. I mean, if price wasn't a factor, maybe this. The only thing I like about the DRZ, it feels a little bit more home on the trail, whereas this feels a little bit more home on the highway, I would say. All right, let's try some single track on the 690 Enduro. The challenges with this bike is it can, compared to an Enduro bike, it's obviously heavier. And it's pretty tall. It can be a little tippy. The gearing, what I find is just the gearing is so tall for street and highway that it just makes this more challenging. A lot of clutch abuse and things like that. You can re-gear it, but then you would lose your highway performance, I think, for the higher speeds. So let's take a look and see how we go here. Oh, this is really low speed stuff. So I really have to like slip the clutch a lot, and I worry about getting the clutch hot. The bike is happy to do this. It's just, except for the gearing, I think is the only real challenge, I would say. Certainly feels like it feels more closer to a dirt bike or an enduro bike than an adventure bike. Like if you asked me, does it feel more like an ADV or more like a enduro bike, I would say it feels closer to the enduro bike. So really it's just the super tall first gear, but like we're doing it. And the steering lock as well. Like I was at full lock on that turn just to get around that. You can adjust the lock a little bit, but because of the trellis frame, this is something that you have with this bike. This is limited steering lock. So it can be on really tight terrain. If you ride in really tight terrain, that can be a pretty big problem. Go through the rocks here. Oops, stalled her out. Oopsie. Where am I going here? Oh, I think I'm supposed to go up there. Oops. Okay. See, now it's just kind of awkward to regain my composure here. Oh man, she's tall. Well, we'll just go. God, it's so tall. See if we can get up through here. Oh, I have to abuse that clutch so much. Oh, where's my trail? This is fun though. It's still fun and it's capable of doing it. But if you were going to do a lot of single track, you would just really need to change the gearing a lot. Like, ow, you'd really have to modify that gearing like a ton. Beautiful day out here. just it is a bit awkward when you get kind of stuck. It starts to feel the weight of it. It's hard to get going with that super tall first gear, and it feels kind of tippy and awkward. But you know, compared to an 890, I mean, I'd rather be on this because it's just so much smaller and lighter. I'll try to turn this thing around with this steering lock. It's kind of crazy. It's just like has the steering radius of the Titanic over here. It's kind of like with any bike you have, you'll get used to the shortcomings of whatever you have and sort of adapt to it. But my job is to sort of hopefully give you a balanced perspective on the good and bad of all these bikes, and you can decide what compromises you can accept. Yeah, see, this is the line right here. I messed up on that one. Really wish I had some hand guards on this bike and maybe some radiator protection. I'm super worried about breaking the radiator. If I fall in that rocky stuff, I could smash the radiator up and then we'd really have a problem. Not having hand guards. I've actually already had a little oopsie on this bike, and I damaged the grip and bent the lever and almost broke the brake lever. So hand guards would be good. There's one thing that I really don't like about this bike, and you notice it more when the weather's a little bit warmer or you're going slower, is that it runs super hot. The amount of heat that you feel on the back of your legs, like through here, and also on the front through here, like this, I guess it's the whole package. The engine and the exhaust are just so hot. Like, you really feel like your legs are in an oven. If you're going faster, the weather's cooler, you don't notice it very much. But when you start to slow down, or it's a warmer day, like above 80 degrees Fahrenheit, I'll put the Celsius below, I really find the engine heat to be intrusive on this bike, to the point that it feels like your legs are almost like, yeah, just like in an oven. It's really uncomfortable. I can even feel it right now, just stopped, and today's very cool. We're in the 60s in Fahrenheit, and I still feel it a lot. Like, my legs are hot and my upper body's almost cold from the air. So that's one big negative that I did want to cover. All right, let's do our sand test. Now, for the traction control system, I've got it in rally mode, and I have it turned to 0, which is off. So we'll start with that just to test for the sand. But then I want to play with this fancy new dynamic slip adjust, which is supposed to react to the terrain and sense when you need more wheel spin and automatically apply it. So I'm going to play with that once we get down into the sand wash here. So let's go have some fun here. A bit of a drop. It's like you would expect. The bike, it doesn't really feel like a big heavy adventure bike, because it isn't. It's more of that dual sport bike. Yeah, the gearing is really tall. Second gear's almost too fast for this wash. But you can be playful and you can explore places that you probably wouldn't otherwise explore, because this bike is light enough, has great suspension, and is powerful enough to do this. Yeah, even with TKC 80s, I can really fly through the sand on this bike. It works very, very well. Oops, kind of got out a little bit. Oh, somebody's track, probably my old track. Let's go back down the other way. Woo! This is fun. Okay, back in the main wash here. Let's yeah, let's play with this traction control. Let's see. Let's see what we can do. Let's turn it all the way up to 9, which is maximum, which is probably what you're not supposed to do, but let's see what happens. Yeah, see, that's too much traction control. It doesn't really seem to be cutting out the traction control. I mean, I was moving forward in sand. Let's try number 6. 6, 7, 6, 7, 6 or 7. What do you think? 6, 7, 6, 7. Well, let's try 6. Yeah, I mean, you could ride the sand with that. I think I liked it more with it off, but it still gives you some pretty good wheel spin there, some pretty good drive forward. Let's go down to 3. Oh yeah, 3. 3 feels a lot better. So I guess it is like technically like adjusting to the sand or whatever, but I don't know how much I can tell that effect. Comparing it to the 890 that I'm used to, that has the same 1 through 9. I don't know if it feels that much different, but I guess I would need more testing to really figure that out. But overall, I mean, as a dual sport bike, you want to be able to go anywhere, and this bike really can. It's confident enough to do deep sand, whereas you probably wouldn't be on something like a 1290 unless you were really an expert rider.
Okay, it's time for the Big Rock report card. I'll put this up here on the screen, and I'll also link to this below if you want to download it for reference. So here's the scores I gave it. For off-road suspension, I gave it an A. Handling, I gave it a B. Just marked down a little bit due to the balance, I think, because of that rearward weight bias. Ground clearance, A. Rider aids, A. Braking, A. Ergonomics, A. Stability, I will give it a C on stability. Throttle response is A. On-road ranking, suspension, B+. Handling, B. Braking, I have B, but I think I might downgrade that to like a C+. Engine power is A, and rider aids are A. For comfort ratings, wind protection doesn't have any, so I'll have to give it an F there. Engine heat, which factors into comfort, I give that a D. It's pretty bad. Seating comfort, I was shocked how good it was, so I actually give it a B. And ergonomics, I'll give it a B. Other rankings, shift quality is a B. I feel like it's better on this bike than the outgoing bike. Headlight, I didn't have time to test it at night, so NA. Lift test rating, pretty good, so I give that a B. Overall fun factor, A, and I should probably give it an A+ for overall fun factor. All right, let's summarize the pros and cons as I see it to the 690 Enduro. The pros for me, the pure fun factor of riding this bike. The power to weight ratio is incredible, and it's just a thrill to ride. Next up for me is the overall versatility. I would say this is the most versatile single motorcycle that I've ever reviewed. In the same day, you can go from freeway to single track to off-road and everything in between. And it's actually pretty good at everything, which is a phenomenal feat for one motorcycle to be able to do all that. Next up for me as a pro, the off-road capability of this bike is very, very high. Next up, the powerful and smooth engine. For a single cylinder, it's unbelievably powerful, it's unbelievably smooth, and they've even thrown in, I was also have on my list here, long maintenance intervals with that. That is like crazy that they were able to achieve that, so 2 thumbs up for that. Also with the engine, they've improved the low-end power, the throttle response, the power at low and mid RPM, which really makes this a much better motorcycle. Next up for me as a pro, the rider aids. The electronics they've added are very, very useful, easy to use, and they make riding safer and faster on the street and in the dirt. And if you don't want them, you can turn them off and it will remember that setting. So man, there's no downside to this. Next up for me as a pro, the suspension is incredibly good on this motorcycle. There were no corners cut on that. Now, what are the downsides? There are some significant compromises with this bike. The overall handling balance can be a little bit weird sometimes, especially off-road with this bike. Having a rearward weight bias with this fuel in the back, It can create, I don't want to call it instability, but it just creates a little bit of funky handling at times, where I feel like the front is kind of light and kind of, I don't want to say unstable, but just not totally sure-footed, and you kind of feel the weight on the rear moving around more. I think it would greatly benefit from adding a little bit of weight up front. So I'm not totally against this design like some people are, but there is a little bit of compromise there in the handling. The next downside for me is the extreme seat height of this bike. Unless you're, unless you're my height or taller, this bike is going to be very difficult for you to manage with this seat height. Next downside is the overall comfort is, while it's better than I thought it would be, it's still not great. I would say the ergonomics are pretty good. The seat was surprisingly good, better than I thought, better than I ever remember being, and I swear they improved that, although they say that they didn't. I think the lack of wind protection is a big one because this bike is so capable of higher speeds. So anyway, comfort is not great, but it's better than you might think. The gear ratios, that's a big downside. The gear ratios on this bike don't make much sense to me. They seem too tightly spaced. So the bike comes set up with the highway gearing in stock form. So cruising at 80 or 90 miles an hour is actually not bad at all. But you try to go slow speed off-road, single track stuff, first gear goes to like 30 or 40 miles an hour. You're slipping the clutch, making it, the clutch burn out. And if you gear it for off-road, then you're going to be not having a very good highway cruising gear. So I feel like if there was a single thing I could improve about this bike, it would be to change those gear ratios to make them more widely spaced. I think it's hard for KTM to get this figured out because this bike is so freaking versatile that maybe they just can't make the gear ratios match that level of versatility. I don't know, but I think it could be better. The placement of the key is awkward. If you have a tank bag or anything up here or a steering stabilizer, this key is in a really annoying place. Along the same lines, the placement of this gas cap with the fuel in the back, obviously you have that. If you put soft luggage on here, you have to make sure you get luggage that has a cutout for this fuel cap because that can be kind of annoying. Another downside, and I showed this, is the really wide turning radius. So the steering lock is very tight on this bike and it makes turning it around on a trail really kind of a chore. It's one of the only bikes where I jammed into the steering stop in normal riding. Another downside, which was significant, is in warm weather at low speeds, this bike absolutely cooks your legs and your lower body. Just cooks it. That's a pretty big downside, and I would have to think twice about buying this bike with that issue because it really bothers me. Okay, it's time to answer some audience questions you had on social media that I don't think are covered throughout the rest of the review. So somebody asked, what are the differences between this and the Husqvarna 701 Enduro? Really, it's just the colors of the bike and the design of the seat is a bit different on the Husqvarna. I think sometimes the hydraulics are different between KTM and Husky. You might be Brake Tech versus Magura versus Brembo on some of this stuff, but it's so minor that you really won't notice. So there's really, just buy whichever one you can get a better deal on. Do you like white and blue or do you like orange and white? It's just sort of the same bike really. Is this or the 890 Adventure R easier to ride fast off-road? That's a really intelligent question. It seems like the obvious answer would be this is easier to ride fast, but actually in some situations, I think that the 890 feels better balanced. On more open flowing terrain, I think the 890, you might be able to ride it faster with more confidence. But as soon as you get into tighter terrain or more challenging terrain, I think the less weight of this bike, I mean, you're talking a tremendous weight difference, that really shows through. So it depends on what kind of terrain you're talking about. Did they improve the low-end power? Yes, we've covered that. Would lowering the gearing make it better off-road? Yes, you could lower the gearing, it would improve it off-road, but you will sacrifice then on the highway for cruising at higher speed. So you have to pick your poison there. Will there ever be a 690 Adventure? Oh my God, that's the question of the century, I think. If they could do an adventure version of this bike, I mean, a lot of people build their own, right? I mean, I have in the past, a lot of you have. I think that would be killer. I think that would be the unicorn off-the-shelf adventure bike if they built an adventure version of this. I'm not My answer to your question is I don't know, because it would cannibalize the 890R, it would cannibalize maybe some of the 500 sales, and it would cannibalize this. So I don't know if they're going to do that. I hope they do. KTM, please do that, but I wouldn't hold out my hopes for it. Another person asked, can you improve the handling if you add some weight to the front of the bike, like with the rally tower and the front fuel tank? In my opinion, yes. It would greatly benefit from balancing out this rear fuel tank with a little bit more up front. I think then you start to get into better handling and you start to bring this into that unicorn territory. The final question, and I think this is an amazing question, is could it replace both an enduro bike and an adventure bike? So I'll give you an example. So I own a Beta 500 RS enduro bike, technically a dual sport, but it's really an enduro. And I have an 890 Adventure R. This bike could technically replace both of those, but it wouldn't be as good on single track as my Beta, not even close. And it wouldn't be as good for adventure touring as the 890, but technically you could do everything. So if you're looking to combine and have less bikes in the garage and do more with one motorcycle, this would be the bike to do that. So I think technically the answer is sort of yes, depending on how picky you are about your riding and what compromises you'd be willing to make. All right, let's talk about competitors to the 690 Enduro. As a dual sport bike with 80 horsepower and the versatility that this has, I would say there is no direct competitor to this bike. What about versus an enduro bike like a 500 EXC, which you can get obviously as a dual sport, a plated bike? The bike like the 500 or a 350, it's really not suitable for extended highway travel. It doesn't have the gearing, it doesn't have the smoother engine, it doesn't have the maintenance intervals, it doesn't have the stability. It's not set up for that. It's set up for enduro stuff. So this is like a larger, heavier version of a 500 that adds that true highway capability in there, but sacrifices in the enduro terrain. So I would say like the 500 is more a 90-10 bike, 90% off-road, 10% street, whereas the 690 is like a 60-40 bike, 60% off-road and 40% street, if that makes sense. What about versus an 890 Adventure R? Okay, first thing is that the 890R is 140 pounds or 63 kilos heavier than this bike. That's a tremendous weight difference. Now, where you feel that weight really is in technical off-road situations, right? That's where you really feel it. Does the 890 feel 140 pounds heavier? I'm not sure. I think it hides its weight a little bit better than the 690 does. The 890, I really like the 890 because it's got pretty good balanced handling with the fuel tank centralized around the engine in the front. I really do prefer that design to this. The 890, I think the handling balance in a lot of situations is better, but it depends on the mix of highway to dirt to off-road riding that you do. That's really what it comes down to. If you look at the test loop I did in this video, freeway, single track, sand, all the different stuff that we did, the 890 is probably a better bike for all those things except for two areas. The sand wash, where this lightweight really comes in, and then the single track where the 890 just feels heavy and awkward, because it kind of is. Beyond those two categories, I would prefer the 890. You really just have to choose what your priorities are. Now, what about versus KTM's 390 Enduro R, which I also did a review on recently? That's a good one, a good question. The 390 Enduro R is like a scaled down version of this, about half the horsepower. The suspension performance is really poor on that bike, whereas this is really good. So, twice the price on the 690, that's a huge price difference. Are you getting twice the bike? Yeah, I think you are. I mean, power, performance, suspension, everything is so much better on this. But if you don't ride super fast and aggressive and you can live with the soft suspension and kind of a buzzy engine with not much torque, then the 390 is pretty great. A 390 can do everything I showed in this video, just maybe not quite as fast or having as much fun, if that makes sense. What about versus the Suzuki DRZ 4S? I thought a lot about that while I was riding this bike and trying to think back to the DRZ 4S. So this reminds me of the DRZ in that it's a really good, capable dual sport to do everything. The DRZ is limited on highway power. It's limited by not having 6 gears. It doesn't quite have the fuel range and capacity of this. It doesn't have some of the fancy electronics. But I gotta say, the DRZ, for the money, it's like $4,000 less than this. If you can live with, well, it is half the horsepower. That's kind of a crazy difference there. But for $4,000 less, the DRZ gives you a lot of performance. And I would say it has better off-road handling and handling balance. The suspension's really good on the DRZ, but I think when you throw in like the freeway travel, or if you just like to ride really fast, I mean, you can't beat the 690. All right, final thoughts on the 2026 690 Enduro R. I really am very pleased with the improvements and the changes they've made for 2026. So I think it does, losing my notes here. I think it does come down to the question of who is this bike for, right? So if you're an experienced rider, you like to ride fast, you're tall enough to handle the seat height of this bike, and you want a maximum versatility out of one motorcycle to cover the maximum amount of different types of riding, this, and also comfort is not a huge priority for you and you can live without the wind protection and some of the adventure bike features, then this is the bike you should buy. Like if that fits your profile, then this is the best bike in the world to do what I just said. It's probably also your only choice because there's really nothing else like this out there. I think if you can live with some of the downsides and the compromises we talked about with the 690, then, and many of you can because you already are, and a lot of you are huge fans of this platform, including myself. I think if you can live with those downsides, then you will, and you maybe already are, finding the 690 to be your unicorn dual sport motorcycle that can literally do just about everything. And I really do think that this is the single most versatile motorcycle that I've ever tested. The 690 Enduro, especially now with this new one, I think is also an amazing platform for customization and building out to a lightweight adventure bike. So if you have visions of putting on a rally tower and the fuel tank that replaces the air box to get some weight up in the front, add your fuel capacity, improve the comfort a bit, oh my God, you would have an absolute unicorn on your hands, except maybe for the gearing, which I don't know how to fix that because I still don't like that. But this is going to be an incredible platform for customization and turning into a lightweight adventure bike. I don't think it makes sense to try to turn it into an enduro bike because it's just never going to be good at that. But if you want a small adventure bike that's lightweight but still powerful, this is it. This is it right here. All right, well, we covered a lot in this review. I really enjoyed making this one. This bike is an absolute riot, just so much fun to ride in almost every situation. Really enjoyed doing this review for you guys and gals out there. If I missed anything, if you have questions, put that down below. I'll do my best to get back to you. If you want to support the independent journalism and the work I do here at Big Rock Moto, there's a lot of ways to do that, and those will be down below in the description and the pinned comment. Thank you so much for watching. Ride safe. I'll see you out there.